And welcome to an hour with the Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman, Chair. And of course, as always, on the big board tonight, we have John Gabso, volunteer extraordinaire, bringing our production to life. I'm your host, Pat Ford. I'm the proud chair of the Libertarian Party, Rhode Island. Tonight, we're going to deviate from sort of our normal programming. A lot of our focus is obviously, on candidates. Candidates who are considering a run, candidates who have run and run great races and gotten elected, and, candidates who often run outstanding efforts and somehow just missed the mark. But it's a kind of a curious time of the year. We're sort of in that gap between most of the special elections that have taken place and the true run-up, if you will, to the few races that are on the ballot for 2021. And, of course, hitting the real stride as a party, as affiliates, as candidates for the 2022 efforts. By the way, I'll take a moment to say if folks are interested in appearing on Candidates Corner, just reach out to me. I'm everywhere on Libertarian Media. Again, it's Pat Ford. Find me on the Facebook. We'd love to have you on the show. We want to take a moment to talk about some of the recent history and some of the efforts made, by people sort of behind the scenes to engineer elections, to come up with strategies. And there has been no more successful strategy in the sense of true down ballot, if you will, boards and electoral positions that might not be as obvious or in the public eye as there were a year or so ago in the great state of Pennsylvania. In what is widely known as become the Moulton Maneuver, our guest tonight was intimately involved in the recruitment, the positioning, the strategy behind the race, and ultimately a record number of Libertarian wins in one night in one affiliate state. It was an astonishing performance that had been, spoken about for a while, but caught a lot of the Libertarian nation by surprise for, number one, the sheer audacity of it. Number two, the fact that, we could do that. Number three, a reflection on the reality of the really hard work by both the state party as well as the individual candidates' efforts. So coming into 2022 with it sort of appearing on the horizon, I wanted to take this opportunity to have Jennifer Moore join us. She is the Eastern Pennsylvania Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. And in addition to Dr. Moulton and a handful of other people that we'll talk about tonight, she was intimately involved, if you will, in the successful execution and the subsequent election of 47 Libertarians using said Moulton Maneuver. Jennifer, welcome to Candidates Corner, an hour with the candidates. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me.
So let's sort of start at the very beginning.
Sure.
We have a format here on the show, and it's funny because it's strictly by the letters in one sense, but it works because part of the reasoning underlying the show is to get affiliates in contact with another, to bring to life people that you may have only chatted with online, or that you were on a phone call, conference call with, or whatever. We bring to folks the efforts and the recognition of the successes and the challenges of individual affiliates and candidates as they work towards successful elections. Ultimately, the purpose of the Libertarian Party is to elect candidates. Very often we imbue it with all sorts of, other functions, but that's why we're here. Tell us about yourself, your liberty journey, how you became a libertarian. And as we always say, when was that magic moment when the light bulb went up over your head and said, damn, I'm a libertarian?
Well, I had been a libertarian for years, but I really wasn't involved with the party until 2017. I went to the state convention and had a really good time. And at that time, I swore I'd never run for office. I swore I'd never become a party officer. That didn't last too long because I was elected that fall. Dr. Moulton had been talking about targeting uncontested elections for years. And that year, he looked at my township and he said, you have a judge of elections and an auditor position open. And I said, well, which one's better? He said, well, go for the auditor. You have a financial background. So I did. I went and got the signatures and got in the ballot, so I thought, and then I was challenged by the Republican supervisor in the area. And I think that was really what started the journey, because I was really, really upset. Like, it just seemed so unfair. The fact that nobody else wanted this position and they still were going to try to keep me off the ballot. So I went to court, and what had happened was they gave me the major party signature totals. They told me I only needed 10. So I went out and got like 18 or 20 to be safe. I really needed 46. So I went to court. The judge gave me time to get more. I went out and got around 100 and turned them in. I made the ballot. I, won my election. And from there, I kind of looked back at what had happened. I really felt like there wasn't a lot of institutional knowledge. I'm so grateful to my county committee, because they helped me find a lawyer. I mean, not all of us were new at this. There were several of us who ran for office that year. A few of us made the ballot. A couple of us didn't. But, Andy Hatstadt was our chair at the time, and he's the one who had the foresight to make sure that he got these signatures, or these signature requirements in writing, so that we could prove we were given the wrong numbers. My whole committee stepped up. There was a threat of a write-in candidate against me by the Republican committee, and my whole committee stepped up to help me, get the literature together to hand out on election day. And but really, just like, the fact that we didn't really have the structure in place to guide candidates through this paperwork. The fact that I was the only one who attempted the Moulton Maneuver that year, and even though I struggled with it, I was elected to office. Mm-hmm. We did have a few write-ins win that year, who came to us. Dr. Moulton himself won that year. He's the judge of elections. He won by write-in, but he knew that position was uncontested. So it was just, the anger of how unfair it is that they make it so difficult for us, that our requirements are so much higher, that I decided to become a ballot access expert. From there, I just, I started researching election law, learning everything that I could about it. So the following year, in 2018, I ran our statewide petition drive for Senate and governor. I ran the paid portion. Our executive director, who was not the executive director at the time, Kevin Goggin, he ran the volunteer portion. And we had a really, really successful drive. Everybody got on the ballot with lots of signatures to spare. And then, of course, came 2019. So, that was the municipal year. That's the year that I really was excited about, that, as ballot access people, we know we're going to win elections. And, I was really excited to get the project rolling. So that kind of leads us to where we are, to talk about today. Mm-hmm.
Let's step back for a second on a personal level. You mentioned the importance of having a committee, of having a team. It would be impossible for any one candidate to really mount this, or even a small set of candidates to mount this by themselves, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, everything seems so simple when you look at it, but, but really, I mean, if you have quotation marks, or, somebody, writes the wrong date, I mean, that makes your signatures invalid. You forget to sign the back of the papers. And I know that every state has differences in their paperwork, but I know I put the wrong date on the statement of financial interest. And that was one of the things that I was challenged on. I put, the wrong year. So, yeah, I mean, unless you have people around you who have done this before and can help you avoid the pitfalls, it's really difficult. You will end up in court, and it'll be very expensive.
Right. And assuming that the fine folks who represent the Pennsylvania equivalent of the duopoly have literally thousands of dollars, years of if you will, of experience in this, a truly an astonishing head start when you look at the type of resources. You mentioned attorney, for example. I know that our duopoly friends here in Rhode Island, there's a number of attorneys associated with their cause who are only too happy to while away a late Friday afternoon, because that's when they do it, right? On some type of ballot challenge, because, well, they know that our candidates, given the light of day, given an opportunity to make their case, will in fact represent not only a serious challenge, but ultimately at some point in the future, they know that we will win, and we will win often. So, and you talk about the institutional knowledge, after your first experience running alone, and then having gone through this, it's almost embarrassing to ask this question, but how important is it to document these efforts?
It's very important, but even the documents from year to year can change. I mean, it's just, the papers may change, or we find that we have to continuously update it, or we find the documents were lost. I mean, it's just a tough thing to do, especially when party leadership is transient, which naturally is a volunteer job. So,
Right.
People come and go. I do have to tell you, though, like one of those things that, like, really when it's just a ton of work and it's a slog and you don't want to talk to one more paid petitioner. And then you see a volunteer where, like, you see that light come on, like they're like, this isn't fair. Like, why is it so hard? And you're like, yep, that's it right there. Like, that's why we're doing this, because that's the next person who's going to go on and run and win,
Right. Exactly. I had that experience doing ballot access in Rhode Island for the presidential campaign. Who can anticipate COVID? Who can anticipate successive 95, 100, 102 degree weekends? Who can anticipate monsoon-like weather? Who can anticipate the state being the most difficult challenge in terms of being an obstruction to getting more signatures? Because the only facilities that we thought we could go to, the most cases, were state facilities during this year. It's all a gigantic attempt at disenfranchising the individual voters. And imagine, I would have loved to have been there for their fear and terror when all of a sudden they woke up and, as a wise philosopher once said, ruh-roh, we miss this. So let's spend some time, in a sense, going through the timeline of how you came to this knowledge. First of all, what is Dr. Moulton's cite as his inspiration? Just years of being involved in electoral politics and having shown up at enough town meetings to know that all these jobs were out there?
Dr. Moulton, I mean, he's phenomenal. He's an absolute genius. I mean, I don't know when he came up with this. If any of you guys have ever met him, he's the previous vice chair of national, and he's been around for a long, long time. He lived down in Virginia for a while, and but his family is in Pennsylvania. And he's back here now, and we're very lucky to have him. I don't know when he came up with it. He was talking about it when I met him, but it was just a matter of, he needed the team to see it through, which I think is what we have now.
Right.
And I'm hoping that, this year we ramp it up and we double or triple what we did. I think that we can very easily do that. But, he looked at the quirks of election law in Pennsylvania and found a way to capitalize on it. And we have a gap between primary day, when we know who is on the ballot for the duopoly, and when our nomination papers need to be turned in, like around August 1st. So we have to wait for the primary results to be tabulated. And then from there, we have like that, 5 or 6 week window when we can see there's a place where there's nobody on the ballot. And if we collect our signatures and turn it in, we're going to be uncontested.
So let's start at the beginning, because ultimately the purpose of tonight's conversation is not only just to revel in your success. And I'm a firm believer in spiking that football, and we need, as volunteers, as grassroots operatives, as true believers, as libertarians in a challenging world, when we have these victories, it's critically important that we take a moment and embrace them and revel in them and bask in them and enjoy them. You need that, because you know what? In a few weeks, you're going to be having a look at some ballot access requirement that popped up like the whack-a-mole that electoral politics is, that some twit in the duopoly decided, let's just screw with them. Why? Because we can. We hold all these offices. So part of the formula, the initial step, is actually, Captain Obvious here, is discovering which offices are actually available, isn't it? How much work was that, and how did you actually physically go about doing that?
Well, that has been Chuck's project. He did all of it, and he's amazing, because sometimes he'll send me 5 counties in one night. But he goes through and he has to look at each county one by one. Every county in Pennsylvania, we have 67 of them, and every website is different. So, he's got to look through and see where there's going to be somebody on the ballot and where there won't be, and what positions might be open. I don't know how he works his magic. I'm hoping that he shows me this year so that I can help him. I'm sure that he's willing to, but I know that in the past he did try to automate this, but he found, because every single website is different, it took more time. So the manual process was better.
Right. And so this was literally done on a county by county, town by town basis, wasn't it?
Correct.
Now, I had the opportunity to spend some time. I lived in Pennsylvania for a few years, for the most important years of my life. I spent 4 years in Bethlehem, scenic Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, former home of Bethlehem Steel. And to understand that states like Pennsylvania and New York and Texas are these enormous states with multiple significant media markets, with literally geographically diverse, it would be the understatement. I mean, you and I talked offline when we talked just the other day about you coming on the show. We mentioned something called the Wild, which is a section of Pennsylvania, which is I've driven through dozens of times and is just beautiful country, but it is country, and it is called the Wild because it is a hunting and fishing and camping sportsman's paradise. But how do you how do you find town halls literally buried in the hollows of central and southwestern Pennsylvania? I mean, how does one do that?
In those rural communities, that is where we find a lot of, especially like auditors. And I mean, we even find mayor, we find town council, we find township supervisor. Nobody's running for these offices. I mean, it's really the Northeast. There were some in the central part of the state. We didn't get to every county this past time around because there were just too few of us and we ran out of time. But we found that in places like Philadelphia, there were just no opportunities whatsoever. Now, I think there will be this year because we have some different positions open. But the farther you got from the cities, the more opportunities there were where, there's just nobody running for office. And nobody wants these jobs. So, it's a great place for a libertarian to serve. And if you look at historical vote totals for our statewide up in that region, I mean, there are libertarians there. It's very obvious that, we can pull, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7%, easily without even trying. So, those are the places where we really need to break in.
And let's talk about some of the jobs themselves. Dan Fishman, and you have both competed for auditor positions. And Dan did an astonishing job running in one of the bluest states in America. Actually got the endorsement, amongst other newspapers, of the Boston Globe, which to this day I still think, I'm not sure what was more likely to happen, right? The moon landing or Dan Fishman getting an endorsement from the Boston Globe. But the auditor positions, like city clerk positions, and we've got Sasha Cohen, by the way, running in a special to be DeKalb city clerk. So if you have a moment, keep them in your hearts and your minds and your prayers and your wallet. But these are jobs where you are intimate with literally every level of government as it occurs in that jurisdiction, whether it be county, state, or municipal. You truly understand where the bodies are buried, how the sausage, as we say out here in New England, is made legislatively. You really have exposure to everything, don't you?
Yeah, it's interesting in Pennsylvania because some auditors still do the audit and other townships hire a CPA. My township hires a CPA, but I have a very good relationship with them. They've showed me anything I've ever asked for. Right. It's a position that, has been on the books for 100 years. And, in some ways it might be outdated, but it's still really, really important because the auditor does have the power. I mean, you're a board, so you have to have, a quorum of 2 out of the 3, but, you have the power to ask questions and, say, why is this being spent the way that it is? Something looks fishy. I mean, you don't have any control over, decisions about how the money's spent, but you need to make sure it's spent on what it's appropriated for. Right. It's a really, really good position for a libertarian because we're not beholden to either party. I mean, right. It's just, and that's what I ran, both that campaign on, and I also ran for Auditor General of the Commonwealth this past year. Wow.
And it's interesting because Mr. Fishman used the advertising technique. He literally portrayed himself as the referee, as the umpire, because how could you, in all fairness, dictate policy or handle a true arm's length investigation if in fact you're one of the members of the two teams? So again, these are opportunities. What are some other jobs at the municipal level or some of these Moulton Maneuver jobs that people found and ultimately ran and won in?
Yeah, one of the big ones that we're going to see this year, because they come up every 4 years, is judge of elections and inspector of elections. And these are the people who run things on election day at the polls. So it's only a 2-day year commitment. You have to be there on primary day and at the general election. But we saw this last election how important elections integrity is. And that's another great place for libertarians to be. It's a small commitment. And, we can be there ensuring the integrity of our elections. We get a lot of borough council. We get, quite a few supervisors, surprisingly. Auditors are a big one. We see constables, tax collectors, which is always kind of funny. We decided that we're not going to recruit for tax collectors anymore because the people who respond are not libertarians.
Right.
We have had tax collectors elected who, have promptly resigned and, done us proud. But those are, the main type of positions that, we see around the state. Just, a lot of auditors, a lot of judge of elections. I think that's what you'll see this coming year in 2021. But we always try to target school board also, especially in rural areas. We sometimes get people onto school board. It's a lot harder, like, in the big suburban communities where you're running contested races. But, as people gain experience, the way I look at it is maybe they're not running a contested race, but you now have a libertarian serving in government. And they are building the connections and the experience to go on and run again.
Outstanding. We often talk on the show of the role of a libertarian in government is one of a steward. We don't like to say the word govern. We certainly don't like to say the word rule or dictate. We use the word steward here because ultimately libertarians see themselves as stewards of their community resources, shared resources, which hopefully in a future day when liberty reaches our shores again, they're done consensually through relationships and team building and mutual shared desires for the direction of a community, as opposed to this top-down dictatorial form of government that we've evolved in over the last few hundred years. Now, okay, so we've got the offices. The vacancies are out there. Now, again, it's not that simple. You now have to literally match them to individuals in the party, and I would imagine this has got to be the real challenge. People who meet the variety of statutory and residency-based requirements to hold the office. How big of an obstacle is that?
Well, that part of the project was our DeBianca. He was the man who worked the magic with that stuff. So he took all of the open positions and he pulled our list of registered libertarians and he did a mail merge and he matched people up with, you have a auditor position in your township. Sometimes there were more than one position. We would have council and auditor. And, we had an email. It was a letter that Wes Benedict had written saying that, if you run for office and you get on the ballot, you'll likely win. Please call us. So basically, they put these files together and they sent them to me as PDFs. And some counties, I would have 800 or 900 letters. Other ones I had 300 or 400 for. I mean, we're really looking at 80 to 100 positions that are open in most rural counties. Some of the suburban counties, we might have 150 or 200. But I mean, we're looking at volumes of letters. So, he sent the PDFs and they came to me and I started printing.
How? Because the next step is getting people, and as libertarians, we don't like to be told what to do, right? Getting people to engage with that. Now, I'm curious, in an organization like the Libertarian Party, you meet people who right away you can tell are gearing themselves to run for political office. And then there's a whole lot of talented people who that's just not part of their political DNA. And that's fine. Listen, we're an opportunity-rich organization. You want to volunteer and you want to do something, we can usually find your dream spot for you pretty easily, right? So, getting people, you're talking about hundreds of people per region, municipality, zip code, who knows? And then you're trying to match up the office with the person. And it's simultaneously, you're trying to get people to respond. How many people did you kind of have to talk into doing and running for office? Was it a big stretch the first time?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of a process. I don't want to. I want to talk about the fact that just stuffing these envelopes. We sent like 4,500 or 5,000 letters, and
Wow.
like I mean that was, and I did a lot. My mom helped me. I was in Michigan with my family, and my mom helped me do 400 envelopes for Lancaster County. So just
Wow.
getting them in the mail was a huge process. So then and what you were saying to people who maybe like campaigning or running for political office isn't their thing. We did find that some of the people who contacted us, it was the campaign they were afraid of more than the serving. So they were completely willing to be on the borough council if they didn't have to go knock on people's doors and mount a contested campaign. So we did capture in our net a group of people that maybe wouldn't have wanted to run before. So, what happened was those original letters, Wes and Chuck had their name on them.
Right.
So they would call, and let Wes or Chuck know that, I'm interested in this letter, tell me what it's about. And they would vet them. They would go through the normal questions, like, what does being a libertarian mean to you? What are your top 3 issues? Do you understand the position that you're running for? I was really impressed with the people that we got. We had, people who own businesses. We had, pharmacists and, engineers and CEOs of companies. We had tech people. We had the guy who had already been involved in his community for years, mowing the lawns for the elderly. And he went to every council meeting, and he never imagined that as a libertarian, maybe he would have the opportunity to get on that council. Wow. So, I mean, I just was incredibly impressed with the type of people and the type of candidates who came to us. We got a few where they had to have tough conversations and said, to be honest with you, I don't think this is the right role for you. You shouldn't run for office. Now, where I came into this part of the scenario was if somebody wasn't sure, or they wanted to know more about what it was like to serve in an elected position, or they just, needed to be talked into it. Those ones usually got punted to me so that I could have a little bit longer of a conversation with them and say, this is what it's like to be an auditor. I can run you through, what it's like to be a constable, but, I also know an elected constable that, would be willing to talk to you if you want to talk to him. So, a lot of that piece of it was, me reaching out, either by email or by phone and just, talking to them about what it's actually like to serve as an elected libertarian.
Wow. By the way, our experience here now, we've been on the air for about a year. We've been, interviewed dozens and dozens of candidates. For everyone who complains about the quote unquote absence of a bench, the same experience, outstanding candidates. Sometimes they were the last ones to realize it, but just some outstanding individuals have run for office within the last few years in the Libertarian Party, who are clearly going to be ready for prime time, if not now, with just a little bit more experience under their belt. Some diamonds in the rough that have, really, really connected with people in their organizations, in their constituencies, in their communities. You talk about write-in wins. Talk to me about write-in wins. I would imagine that would be pretty time-consuming.
Yeah, well, write-ins, that was kind of the second phase of the project. And after they sent me the files, I handled that part, pretty much on my own. So we sent letters to people and said, if you write yourself in, you have a good chance of winning. If you just write yourself in, you may win. If you can get, 5 or 6 family members or friends to write you in, you have a really good chance. And on the back of that, we sent a sheet that had, just like places where they could cut out, like, this is the position and this is your name and please write me in, to hand out at the polls. Right. I found with the write-ins that the people who had contacted us that they wanted to get on the ballot and they didn't make it, those were the people who were most likely to follow through on a write-in. So this time around, I don't know that I would do a full mailing and put the money into that, so much as just follow up with those leads that we already got from the first round. The other piece of that is the fact that we can't really vet those people to make sure that they're going to represent us well. So a couple of people who won on write-ins, I've seen like some of their social media activity and such afterwards, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not sure that person is a libertarian, but they're serving in office as one now. So, and the third component was the fact that people didn't contact us. They didn't tell us. They just wrote themselves in and they won. So that was, for me, a very just time-consuming process, as I had to go through county by county where we sent letters, and I had to check the write-in wins. And again, every county's different. Like, some of them were really easy, where I could just like type in the last name in a search bar and see if any of the people we had sent a letter to was written in, and other ones were like literally scans of like the handwriting.
Right.
And I had to go through and, look one by one. So we had a lot of wins on election night that we didn't know about for several weeks because I had to audit so many of these counties. And, I understandably, Chuck and Wes were just, exhausted with the calls. So all the calls that came in for that, my number was the one that was on those letters. And it was a lot. I actually took time off work. If you actually there's a picture floating around on Facebook of me with a great big bin of letters. That was the final mailing of write-in letters. And that bin was probably number 6 or 7 that I'd sent out through the whole project. So you can imagine how many calls we got. It ended up costing us a little less than $100 for each candidate that won. And I think that we can probably, carve that down a little bit now that we know not to solicit those tax collectors. And speaking of which, I saw a question in the chat about, can you run for tax collector and then resign? I think if you did that, they would either appoint another tax collector or the administrators would do it. I don't think we're probably going to get out of paying our taxes, but I wish.
It's a noble thought. Folks, if you're just joining us, we are, in fact, the Candidates Corner, or as I like to call it, an hour with the candidates. Joining us tonight is someone who is not a candidate for public office, but brings to us a unique perspective on a process that had astonishing results. It was an astonishing investment of time and money and resources for folks on a personal level, but rewarded libertarians in Pennsylvania with none other than 47 positions across the Commonwealth. So for all the time invested, a statement is made on a couple of levels. First of all, we've got libertarians serving in a variety of capacities, in a variety of communities, in a variety of offices around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But at the same time, it sent really a high water mark for organization and process, something that libertarians are very, very good at. And really points to opportunities around the country for affiliates to engage in this in whatever level they can. Because ultimately, when folks who are win these elections and are serving at the board level, very often at the hyper-local focus, they present an opportunity to serve as libertarian stewards for the communities, for communities that may never have actually met or seen a libertarian involved in the electoral process. So I just want to take a moment to take my hats off to all of you, Dr. Moulton, Wes, you, all the volunteers, your mom, kitchen tables around the Commonwealth were filled with letters and campaign signs and slogans. There had to have been a moment where you stepped back and said, holy cow, this is actually working. When did that, I got to ask you, from a human interest perspective, what was that moment when it dawned on you, like, yikes, shnikes, this could work?
Wes called me and told me he was getting inundated with calls. And then we were at a board meeting and we could hear Chuck listening to candidates call, like on his voicemail. He was accidentally playing it across the board meeting. So at that point, when we realized that like these letters were working, people are reaching out. And at that point, like it was just like too late. I don't know that they intended to turn me loose quite as hard as I went, because Chuck had, we live in Montgomery County, and Chuck had sent like 170 letters just as like a pilot to see how it went. And I was like, this is great, give me more. And I don't know that they expected me to just like push out 5,000 letters. But once I was going, I was going. So, Yeah, I mean, it was really, really exciting because we were getting, hundreds of calls. And honestly, sometimes we had 3 or 4 people who were interested in the same position.
Really?
So we had to say that, and we would normally, we would choose whichever one we thought was the most motivated. And we kind of walk them through ballot access. And then we would follow up to make sure that they were going out and getting their signatures. And if we weren't, we would try to move on to the next one. But I mean, yeah, it was, we had just a lot of phone calls coming in. It was crazy for that few weeks because we had so much activity and, people following up with us to ask more questions. And I mean, it was it was exhausting, but it was great because we knew on election night that we had 25 people on the ballot and they were all going to likely win. A few of them actually did have duopoly, write-in campaigns against them, and those people still lost by like 40% to 60%. So that tells you how powerful getting on the ballot is.
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, Sasha Cohen is running in Illinois, and he managed to find one of those hidden gems. And there was talk of a write-in campaign. And to his eternal credit, he is campaigning as hard as if someone was sitting on the ballot in the next slot just below him. So you talked about vetting candidates. That's a challenge for a lot of people. There's, I imagine a debate goes on everywhere. You've got on one hand, someone who can win an election. And by the way, this happens at every level of the Libertarian Party, as we're about to know, right? On the other hand, whether or not they're quote unquote libertarian, which of course, has the opportunity to create that, are you libertarian enough for me? But there's viability of the candidate versus, well, just how libertarian they are. What were some of the ways that you quote unquote vetted? What were some of the questions you asked when interviewing folks on just a broad level?
I mean, what was most important to me in talking to these people was, that they understood what they were running for. If everything was at like the national level, and, they were talking about, things that they're just never going to do as a township auditor or borough council. Like, I wanted to see some kind of like local engagement. Right. And so I would ask them what their top 3 local issues were. And sometimes it was just that they were mad at the local supervisor and they wanted to, they wanted to be on the board, and I get that too. But, usually if you ask, what are your top 3 issues? Why are you a libertarian? And most of them gave the right answers. That was enough. What do you see yourself doing in this position? And sometimes they ask good questions about, what the position entailed. And I mean, that's fair because we cold called them. Like if they were coming to ask for a nomination, I would expect a lot more detailed, answers to those questions. But, we're the ones who sent them a letter and asked them to run. So, the main thing is, I think that if you have the interest in running for most of these positions, then you're probably qualified to serve. Right. And I want them to represent us well, but just in having a conversation with someone, you can tell if they're grounded and, you can never tell in a short interview, but, things could always go off the rails later. But, the ones that really, they didn't know what a libertarian was or why they were registered that way, those ones became apparent very quickly.
Right. And that's, my next question just sort of lends itself to the flow of that, if you will, that vetting process. I mean, how many of them were you able to do in person versus, now this is of course pre-COVID, right? How many of them were you able to do in person versus how many did you just have to go with a phone call and just trust your instincts?
It was phone calls because we got to remember we were doing this from the state level. But that brings me to another really important point. The places that won the most elections were the places where there was local engagement, where we walk these people through their paperwork. We talk to them about what they need to do. We say, this is a candidate that, we approve of, obviously. And now that we have minor party status, the counties are going to have to sign off on these people to the county to even say that they want them to be their candidate. All the counties that I did this for, and that, Chuck and Wes, every one of those counties, we had talked to them and made sure that they were okay with us doing the vetting. If they would have wanted to, we would have found a way to make sure they talked to the candidates instead, because this is a bottom-up organization. Everything is local. But the ones where we walked them through ballot access and then the local chair or a local activist in that county followed up and called them a week later and said, "Are you okay? Do you need help with your signatures? Have you gotten started? Do you have any questions?" I know that, we have several, chairs around the state that went and they met these people for coffee, and they looked at their signatures and said, "These are all bad. You're going to get challenged off the ballot." Or, some of them, went out and petitioned with these people and just said, "Okay, we're going to take an afternoon. We're going to get this knocked out in 2 hours. You only need 20 signatures, and I'm going to show you the ropes." And that's the thing that I think is going to make this year so much more successful, because we have all of these people that came from the Jorgensen campaign who helped petition. You got to figure 60% of our petition drive in Pennsylvania in 2020 was volunteer, and we turned in over 10,000 signatures. We had, dozens of individual volunteers all over the state who have a rudimentary understanding of ballot access and petitioning in all of these counties. If these people can pick up the ball and do the follow-up, and even vet their own candidates, and we have that local touch, we're going to have a lot more wins and get a lot more people on the ballot. I mean, it just simply is that face-to-face, and being able to go and meet them for coffee and talk about it.
Right. And I've got to believe, too, that winning breeds investment, brings along folks now who've seen it happen and seen it work, and say, "Okay, I'm gonna dive into this. This could happen." And I had the opportunity myself during the Jorgensen campaign to meet Sam Robb and work a little bit with Sam Robb, who was an outstanding campaign manager and did a lot of great things in Pennsylvania. So you've got this this great nucleus of folks across. Again, folks need to understand that a state like Pennsylvania is just so diverse. Even their cities have their own personalities. No one would ever mistake Pittsburgh for Philadelphia. And ironically, the biggest mess in the state of all is like Harrisburg, isn't it? They're the ones that actually literally were not just morally bankrupt as a duopoly, they were bankrupt. And then, of course, like I said, you've got manufacturing, all the complexities that very often individual localities exhibit are all mixed up into this gigantic stew of a state. And so one size does not fit all. And it takes really that hyper level focus, and it takes place the organization being put on the ground at the affiliate level. And these are the issues we're going to focus on over the next couple of weeks, including an exciting announcement. We are adding a show to the LPTV lineup very soon. Are there any other lessons that you took from this that you want to share with people? And what kind of message do you have for folks who might consider, after hearing this show and hearing the legends, if you will, of the Moulton Maneuver, what would you like to say to them?
I would say, just what I said before. If you are interested in running for office, you're probably qualified for one of these small level offices. Please go and run. And, if you are looking at doing something like this in your state, it's incredibly important to make sure that you have, people to rally around you. It was a small group of us this time around, but I can't say enough, Kevin Goggin, and he got a group together to stuff envelopes out in central Pennsylvania in the Harrisburg area, and they got all of their stuff in the mail. And they also went out and, helped on election day to hand out literature and stuff. John Waldenberger, who's commented here a couple times, he stuffed like 800 or 900 envelopes for me for York County. So make use of your team. This time around, it was mostly funded by just a couple of people who were really, hi, John, who were really they really believed in this project. And so we, all paid for what we needed to pay for, and we got the envelope stuffed and we got it out. The state party did kick in some money for postage for the write-in, but the rest of it was all just volunteers who spent, hundreds and thousands of dollars of their own money, honestly. This time around, the thing about it is, success, makes people want to be involved. So this time I think it's going to be easier for us because people see that it works. Right. And so, I think that it's going to be an easier sell because we, can show our success with it. Now, if you want to do this in your state, the main thing is that you would need to have a libertarian registration. States with no partisan registration, you're probably not going to be able to identify these people. even if you don't have that window to be able to get someone on the ballot, you can still identify those write-ins. You'll probably have time after the primary to take a look. I don't know how it would be posted on county websites in your state, but there may be an opportunity there and if you have on the ground local volunteers, you can send them out to the polls to hand out cards, and a couple hours, a lot of these people will probably win. My mom just had one in Michigan where the township trustee went uncontested. And if somebody would have noticed, now granted, they don't have partisan registration there, but if somebody would have noticed, if a libertarian would have seen that there was nobody running for office, they could have easily run in the general election and won on write-in. So, no matter where you are, there's probably opportunities that you can exploit in the electoral system. Like I said, it is unfair. Things are stacked against us. We have to take the opportunities where we have them.
Right. This is the part of the show, as regular listeners will know, we refer to as shameless self-promotion. So I want to give you an opportunity to tout any candidacies, any methods of donation, how you can support, if you will, the Moulton Maneuver as it continues on ever upward in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Lay it on us.
Yeah, the main thing that we need for this is funding. Like I said, it cost about $100 to, win every one of these elections, just because we send out that many letters. We send out 100 letters, we may get 2 or 3 responses, which doesn't sound great, but as you ramp it up, it results. We see the results. We get wins. So every $100 that somebody's going to send us, we're going to elect somebody with it, and you're going to have a libertarian serving in office for a 2, 4, or 6 year term. So please consider donating to this initiative. I think that this is how we build the farm team. We get people into these positions. I think that we'll start winning contested elections because we'll have people who know everybody in their community. They've already been serving. And I think that in 2024, 2026, we're going to see places where, out in the wilds where we have state rep districts where, there's only, 5,000 to 8,000 voters, and there's an incumbent that everybody's tired of who's been there for 10 years, where we may have the opportunity to win a 2-way race and get somebody to Harrisburg. I think that we're building towards that. We have had a lot of great, candidates around the state too, in contested races that are technically unwinnable. I'm telling you that in every single one of those places where we have down ballot, candidate, or we have, a state rep or even a statewide candidate, they build on each other and we get higher vote totals if there's more of us running. So, right. In also places where people have run year after year after year, even if it's the same name on the ballot, it normalizes it. One year we may get 1%, the next year we may get 3%. All of that builds. And, it's going to make us successful. This has to be a long-term strategy. We're not going to put somebody in Washington overnight. Right. We have to do this a little at a time. So, that's the main thing that I would say is please donate. We will make good use of the money, and we will get elected libertarians serving in office.
Well, what can I say? But this, what an outstanding effort. And it's great because we see a lot of outstanding efforts. Like you, I have great hopes for our future candidates. There are people serving in office, as we say almost every week, that I am convinced will be presidential candidates in the years to come on behalf of the Libertarian Party. And this is where they start. And it's such a powerful model because seeing folks embrace, if you will, almost unconsciously, libertarian ideals because folks in their community are serving as stewards of their community, that selfless libertarian model. And all of a sudden, a libertarian candidate, that isn't such a strange idea anymore, because if you are blessed enough to have Cara Burns as your council person, well, not only are you not afraid of libertarians, you want to see more of them. We as candidates are unparalleled in our ability to address issues head on, to bring to people a different set of ideas, which is founded really on individualism and self-ownership, and much more identify more closely with people in our community. We are, by and large, the solution for a lot of the societal ills and the government near collapse that's occurring during this pandemic. And I wish a lot of us had been in place before then, because the impact wouldn't have been nearly as severe. I'm convinced of that. But it's your efforts, and Dr. Moulton and Wes and again, your mom and all of those folks, just a heartfelt congratulations and a lot of love, because you have spun the libertarian community on its head, and let's embrace this at whatever level we can going into 2022. It's just too many opportunities out there for us to succeed. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Now everyone, at some point, we'll have thousands of people watching this show, and either tonight or in repeat, and up there, it'll stay up on the Facebook page. We're going to share it around, because we want the affiliates to see this success and embrace it on their own. So prepare yourself for probably a whole nother round of phone calls. In this case, it won't be someone running to be the auditor for Downingtown, Pennsylvania. It'll be somebody running to be the auditor of Elk Grove, Minnesota or something. Be prepared, because folks are going to look to you and your crew there for leadership in replicating this across the country.
Well, that's okay right now. Once I get to, when the primary votes are tabulated, and we're looking at mid-June through our August 2nd turn-in, I'm going to be a little bit busy. So
there you go. Yeah. And final thought, and actually brings up a question. This effort really needs, if an affiliate is looking to duplicate your success, they really need to begin this effort now, don't they? I mean, the earlier the better, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a position right now where if we wanted to, we could go through and we could look and see where there's nobody running at all. Now, there may be write-ins at the primary, and that's why we wait till after the primary. But if you wanted to get ahead of the game in Pennsylvania, you could, go and look and see where there's uncontested positions, and some of them will fall off with write-in wins. But the main thing is right now, we need to be training our people on ballot access and how to get good signatures. We need to get these teams together so that they're ready to go when the time comes. You can't do all of that at the last minute. So I'm telling you, I've had at least 3 people contact me today with questions about their paperwork, and because our petitioning period just started 2 days ago on the 10th. So right now we have people who are announced who are running for office in the state. And, as we help them through it, hopefully they'll already have all their signatures and be ready to help with the next phase when the time comes, and they'll be ready to go and help all these other people get on the ballot. I mean, that's how it really works, is if you start early, then you're just going to have a lot more success and you have more candidates on the ballot. Everybody will be up to speed, and that you get your documentation together and your process down as well.
Right. Well, we've got a happy announcement starting this Monday at 9:00 under the supervision, if you will, of the Affiliate Support Committee of the Libertarian Party, as it's developed by the LNC. We're going to be starting a show at 9:00, and we're going to be focusing every week on an affiliate. And Evan McMahon from the great state of Indiana is going to be joining us. He'll be talking about their rapid fire affiliate development program, the successes they had this past year when they made national news with Mr. Rainwater's incredible performance as a gubernatorial candidate. But we're going to be focusing on the affiliates. So first of all, Jen, thank you so much for joining us. And for folks, our efforts on Monday, on Friday are geared to all of you. So again, if there are candidates, affiliates, whomever that want to be involved in any of these efforts, we welcome your participation. Just reach out to me and we'll get you scheduled in. We'll talk to you a little bit about the show ahead of time, and we'll have a lot of fun on the air discussing the challenges and, most importantly, the successes that we are engendering here as libertarians around the nation. You've been listening to Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a project of the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop, Henshin Chairman. John Gapso on the big board, with whom's support I could not put this show on a daily basis. He's the guy pumping up the maps and the fun and the links and the questions, and I'm grateful for his support. My name is Pat Ford. I'm currently the chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. I love doing this, and I love working alongside of all of you. We'll see you Monday night at 9, and we'll see you next Friday night at 9 as well. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.